20. Droppentown. Sharn meant to go by himself, but Watu stayed by his side wherever he went and would not be dissuaded. Watu's grandmother gave them fish cakes and roasted corn hot off the fire and a few handfuls of dried berries. She put the food in a basket and slung the strap of the basket around Watu's forehead so he could carry it against his back to the canoe. Sharn and Watu paddled their canoe downriver, the setting sun ahead and to the right. They took it in turns to eat while the other steered and paddled. The sky grew red, then purple, then deep dark blue. A three-quarter moon lit the river through a clear sky while the reflected light of uncountable stars danced on the rippling currents. They passed other villages and saw people bathing or fishing or coupling in the shallows. Sharn made a bird call greeting as they passed, making sure anyone who saw them knew they were Kuali, and no enemy or evil spirit. A little ways on, the sun peeked over the horizon again. Sharn and Watu pulled their canoe up on the bank of the river and slept beside it. They woke, ate a little food, slid the canoe back into the water and paddled on. They followed a branch of the river, which became narrower and shallower, until they were forced to leave the canoe behind. They followed the stream out of the dense forest, across tall grass meadows. Sharn noticed new Minkera homes and settlements, where before there had been none. They steered clear of these at first, but eventually could not help but use the wide main path leading into Droppentown. Along the path, they passed older homes which had been there longer than Sharn had been alive, and were as much a part of the geography now as any mountain or river. The young Minkera who saw Sharn and Watu stopped and gawked or ran away in fear. The older ones kept a respectful distance. Some called their young to them, some spat, some smiled or nodded in greeting. Sharn returned smiles and nods and ignored the rest. Watu had not been to a Minkera town. The boy looked from one side of the path to the other, trying to see everything at once. He walked so close to Sharn he almost tripped him. Sharn gently nudged him away, the boy too preoccupied to notice. They came to Droppentown's center, a place where the wide path Sharn and Watu walked intersected with another. Buildings crowded in around the intersection, along the edges of the paths. One of these was called Town Hall, and that is where Sharn went. The buildings here were mostly made of wood, though some, like Town Hall, were made of stone. The stone ones impressed Sharn the most. Eyes peered out at them from windows. Idle men stared from doorways. A few passers-by kept their eyes on the pair of outsiders as they passed. Sharn and Watu stopped outside Town Hall and waited. It would have been rude beyond description to enter a building of another tribe without being invited in. Sharn would never enter the village of another Brinaatii tribe, but he knew Minkera well enough to know the best way to speak with the chief would not be to stand outside the town. In fact, standing outside the town might be the fastest way to get them both shot. After waiting a few moments, a young man opened the door and waved them in. "Please," the young man pronounced slowly in Minkeran. "Come in." They followed him in. "You are here to see the governor?" the young man asked. "Yes," Sharn said in fluent Minkeran, "as soon as possible." The young man looked surprised. "Wait here, please." He walked up a stairway and out of sight. Sharn had learned there were different kinds of Minkera. The farming kind who crept further and further inland, chopping down trees, furrowing fields, building pens to keep livestock. Those were a different kind than the ones who lived in a town like this. The townspeople dressed differently than farmers, talked a little differently, and were in equal measure more afraid of and more intrigued by the Kuali Dane. Sharn could not say which kind of Minkera were better or worse. He also knew from experience that neither kind were all good or all bad. There had been thieves, killers, and promise breakers amongst all the Minkera, no matter where or how they lived. Pondur's people, who were more interested in furs than farming, were another sort altogether. They were more dependent on the Kuali Dane and took greater pains to keep relations peaceful and healthy. The young man returned and beckoned Sharn and Watu to join him at the top of the stairs. "The governor will see you right away," he declared, smiling. They walked up the stairs and followed the young man through an open door into a sizable room. The governor sat facing them behind a great wooden desk, centered between two windows and covered in papers. He rose from his chair when they walked in and came around the desk to greet them, placing a hand on each of their shoulders in a Kuali greeting, which they returned. The man even stooped down so Watu could reach his shoulder. "Hello," he said in Minkera, and then added, "Kiamate," a standard greeting in Kuali. "My name is Katrast," he said, returning to Minkeran. "Governor Katrast." Sharn returned the greetings, first in Kuali, then in Minkeran. "I am Sharn Nalwen," he said, "son to Narateak and nephew to Tiwekto, a chief of the Kuali Dane. I speak with his voice. This is Waturoki, son of Kuchio. He wishes to learn the ways and tongue of the Minkera, just as I have done since I was his age." The governor smiled at the boy, nodding. "Please, have a seat," he said, waving them over to a group of chairs in a corner of the room away from the massive desk. "Would either of you like anything? Saba, perhaps? And sweet bread. Jaredin, bring us some saba and sweet bread, please." After Sharn and Watu were seated, the governor sat in another chair facing the two of them. Bright light filled the room from a window to the governor's right, lighting the dust specks floating through the air like mist in the wind. "I have heard of you, Sharn Nalwen. I have had a message from Ponderast, who says you are a close friend. He speaks of you and your people's desire for peace and protection from our overzealous settlers. He has called on myself and the other governors to meet with your chiefs to discuss peace between our two peoples." "We do seek to establish peace, Governor. It is something I and my people long for very much. But I'm afraid peace is no longer possible between us. Even now my people gather for war and make plans to attack this town." Sharn saw fear in the governor's eyes, fear and confusion. "I am sorry," the governor said. "I do not understand. Why would your people attack this town?" "2 children were taken from one of our villages. Durdin was chief over that village. Durdin's men tracked the children and the men who took them to a house near this town. They waited until dark, broke into the house, killed the men, and rescued the 2 children. If I had been with Durdin, I would have counseled him to bring the matter to the nearest governor, to you, but I was not, and they took the matter into their own hands to deliver themselves the justice they desired. 3 days ago, Watu and I went to see Durdin, to invite him to the peace talks with you and the other Minkaira governors. When we arrived at his village, we found it burned to the ground and everyone dead. More than a few of the dead were Minkera men. The girls and all the boys too young to fight were missing from the village, taken by the Minkera raiders." The governor's face went rigid. He stood and walked to the window. Sharn continued, "It is normal for my people to send a war party to get revenge for an act like this, and that is what they are doing now. But I know the Minkaira desire justice and do not wish many to suffer for the acts of a few." The governor nodded, staring out the window, his eyebrows knotted and his lips tight. "I told them to let the matter lie," he grumbled to himself. "Those bastards want to get us all killed." He looked back at Sharn. "If I free those children who were taken and imprison the men who attacked the village, will that satisfy your people's need for revenge?" They will want to see retribution for so much death, Sharn said. If I hand over some of the men responsible? The governor asked. Some? Sharn asked. The governor sighed. One of them is my nephew. Keep your nephew, Sharn said. The rest will burn. The governor hesitated, then nodded. Right away, then, he said. He stood just as the young man returned with a steaming pitcher of saba and a basket of sweet bread. Jaredin, the governor said to the young man, run and get the sheriff. Tell him it's an emergency. He turned to Sharn and Watu. Please, he said, help yourselves to food and drink. I will see this matter settled myself and return here as soon as possible with the captured children and the men responsible. Sharn stood. Thank you, but we cannot sit here eating and drinking while children of our tribe suffer. It would not sit well in our bellies. Governor Katrast nodded slowly. Of course, he said. I cannot ask you to stay then, but please go to your people and tell them we are freeing the children of their kin so they do not attack in their haste for revenge. Watu will go, Sharn said. He turned to the boy and spoke in Quali. Can you meet the war party and tell them the governor and his men and I are going to free the children and bring justice to the men who took them? The boy nodded. Tell them to hold off the attack. If something happens to me and the governor does not keep his word, then attack, but not until they know for sure. Once you are outside the town, keep to the woods and out of sight. Do not let the Minkaera settlers see you. Can you do this? Watu nodded again. Go with great spirit, Sharn said. Switching back to Minkaran, he said to the governor, he will take the message. I will come with you. Very well, the governor said. He led them out of the room and down the steps. Sharn watched Watu leave the building and asked Great Spirit to look after him. Jaredin returned then, followed by a man even older than the governor. The man wore Minkaran clothes but a Kuali poncho over them and moccasins on his feet. He carried a long knife on his belt like the Kuali Dane, but a Minkaran bow and arrows at his back. The man greeted the governor, then Sharn. Sheriff Starsden, the governor said, how many men can you call upon? Right now, asked the sheriff. 6, I guess, if I round up everyone in town. Twice that, if you include the close farms. How long? Sheriff Starsden thought for a moment. Not long for the townsmen. Maybe an hour more for the farmers. No time, said the governor. Are any of your men in town connected with McClure and his gang? The sheriff thought. 2, I guess. Get the other 4 then. Do not tell them why. Meet us on the south side of town. Jaredin grabbed bows, arrows, and swords from the back room for you and I both. Then come with us. The sheriff left, and Jaredin soon returned with weapons. Governor Katrast, Jaredin, and Sharn made their way south, out of town. Not long after, they were joined by the sheriff and his 4 men, all armed. Together, the 8 men marched toward the captured Quali children and the Minkaera who had destroyed and slaughtered their whole village.